whatever your dream is that he's placed on your heart, he will bring it to pass. In Psalm 37, it says, "Commit your way to the Lord, trust in him, and he shall bring it to pass." The Hebrew word for bring it to pass is asa, which means to make. And it's the same word that's used in Genesis 1 when it says God made the heavens. So it's that same unlocking, that same creative potential and power that God used to create the heavens and the earth will be unlocked if you commit your way to the Lord, if you trust in him, and he shall bring it to pass. So the next time you're doubting and you're uncertain, just remember that he will bring it to pass, not you. All you have to do is commit your way to him and trust in him. If you're not walking by sight and you're walking by faith, because that's what it says in the Bible, to walk by faith and not by sight. Just imagine what that is. If you were blind, or if you just for some reason were not able to see and you were asked to walk, how would you do that? How would you achieve that? You would have to rely on something else. You would have to rely on different senses. You would have to rely on something external to you to be able to navigate the plane successfully. So when we're told to walk by faith and not by sight, that means we need to turn our reliance to something that's no longer ourselves. And when that happens, there's a form of surrender where things may make no sense at all. And one of the stories that I love in the Bible that's related to this is the story of Jericho, when Joshua is given this challenge of facing a walled city. He's asked to do something that makes no sense at all. Yet he walks by faith, literally walks by faith and not by sight to overcome this objective. So if we look at Joshua chapter, the book of Joshua, chapter 1, what I love about it is God starts with a promise for Joshua. He says to him that he basically says that this land will be yours, and no one will be able to stand against you all the days of your life. I will be with you. I will not fail you. I will not forsake you. That's God's promise when we're going against our battles. He will not fail us, and he will not forsake us. It's so easy to be faced with a wall, a challenge, a blocking in your life, and just look at the problem instead of remembering God's promise that he will not fail you. He will not forsake you. But sometimes it requires a faith that can endure, a faith that can be patient, a faith that surpasses understanding. So doing things that, again, make no sense. And when we continue to read the story of Joshua, the way that God promises that this walled city is going to come down is by having them walk around it in total silence. And can you imagine that? An army of armed men literally walking around a city for 6 days one time, and on the seventh day 7 times, and then blowing a trumpet. That was God's instruction. But the amazing thing when you look at it is that before he even begins, God reminds Joshua of his promise that he's not going to forsake him, he's not going to fail him. But he also tells him 3 times in Joshua chapter 1 to be strong and of good courage. He gives him the mindset to walk by faith, to be strong and of good courage. And even the 3rd time he says, be strong and very courageous. So when you're encountering some sort of obstacle that might make no sense, you need to be strong and very courageous in the face of the things that seem insurmountable. And sometimes you might need to have the patience to endure what might feel uncomfortable, but you also have to have the faith to act. And so if you jump to Joshua chapter 6, what we see is when God gives him the instruction, he actually gives him his promise to start. He says, I have given you Jericho. That's a past tense word. I have given you the city already. Even though it's the walls, the doubled walled city, is standing there before him. These walls were 4 feet thick and 12 to 15 feet high. And it was a double-walled city, and it was still standing. Yet what God said to him is that I have given you the city. Past tense. This is already done. And then so when he gives him the instruction to walk around 6 days in a row, one time, and on the 7th day, 7 times, and then to blow the trumpet, we see that Joshua acts immediately. He's given an instruction that makes no sense. It seems odd. How is this going to work? But he trusts God so much so that he doesn't grumble. He doesn't complain. He doesn't seek advice. He doesn't ask a friend to help. He sends his men to act immediately on God's instruction. How often can you say that that's what you do in your life? To act immediately when God tells you to do something, especially if it makes no sense. And Joshua, as a leader, recognizes the value of God's promise. So on the 7th day, they're instructed to walk around the city 7 times. And on the 7th time, he is told to instruct the priests to blow the ram's horn and all of his men to shout. And so just before doing this, and remembering for the past, from the moment that they got this instruction, they have been silent as an army. So imagine now being for 1 week not uttering a word. You've been silent for the full week. And then the words that Joshua says before telling them to shout is he reminds them of the promise that God has given, that this is finished work, that this is done. He says, shout, for the Lord has given you the city. Again, past tense. The walls are still up, but he's speaking as it is already finished. And that's the type of faith and confidence that we need to have when God has placed something on your heart and your mind and given you a vision or a dream. You need to speak as if that is already done. That is walking by faith and not by sight. Because to Joshua, the wall was still standing. To his men, it was still standing in direct opposition to them. But the way that he spoke was as if it was already done. And that's how we need to operate. That's how we need to think when we're walking by faith and not by sight. And the reason I share this story is because God has asked me to do some uncomfortable things. He's asked me to walk by faith and not by sight. And I'm living in a space of discomfort right now of doing my best to honor God and what he's calling me to do, to live to that highest potential, to live to his potential, to commit my way to him, to trust in him and have faith to know that he will bring it to pass. And it's not easy. So this story in Joshua, I feel like is a really good one because it shows you what walking by faith looks like. When you're literally faced with an obstacle, you could choose to focus on the problem or you could choose to focus on the promise. And that's entirely a mindset thing of how you're choosing to walk, or a measure of your faith, if you will. Or if you're choosing to look at the walls and say that they're there, or if you speak to those walls as if they already have come down in your life. And that's what God wants us to do. He wants us to focus on his promise for our life instead of focusing on the obstacles, as real as they might seem and as real as they might be. But the thing about hardships and obstacles is that when you overcome them, they make you stronger. They strengthen your faith. They strengthen your courage. They strengthen you as a person in your life, but also in the lives of others. When people see you overcome situations that might seem that they're insurmountable, and you do so in faith with God, that builds up the faith of other people as well. And that's what we're called to do. In Ephesians, it says we're called to be examples of his kindness. So by walking by faith, by overcoming your obstacle, you're then able to build up the people around you. I hope that this blesses you, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Subscribe if you haven't already.